Hi everybody, welcome to a brand new series of the Future Tech podcast series. This is series 4, Would You Believe? And it's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, where we've evolved our podcasts over the last few series, meeting, speaking to a wide variety of technology experts within many of the companies that a lot of our STEM graduates would be looking for or may not even know about, getting their thoughts, their stories, and that all-important career advice at the end. And so I've got a really unique company today. I've got Artlogic with me today, and I have Hannah and David as part of the podcast. So it's a trio of us. And we're going to be going through not only their journeys, but a really interesting topic about how you combine a traditional industry like art with the fast-paced high-tech growth of technology, and how it provides those more opportunities and how there's a real future. As we all know, technology underpins everything we do. And for Artlogic, it's a living example of how tech really is transforming just yet another industry. So Hannah and David, welcome to the show. How are you both?
Very well, thank you.
And we were just doing some prep beforehand, and we were having a bit of a joke because we were talking about job titles and the names of the company and what we do. And you both are directors within Artlogic, but have been there for quite a while and have both quite specific skills now and roles. But you really are a collaborative team, aren't you? And that's one of the things that has always sort of stood out, I guess, getting to know you guys.
We definitely work in a kind of cross-team way. Part of that is kind of us all being very we've kind of grown through Artlogic together, so we're kind of familiar with each other, what each other does, but also the products themselves are they all relate to each other, so there's a natural kind of crossover there anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, and that's what we're going to get into, I think. So let's start with understanding a bit of your story. So David, if we start with you, give us a sort of a helicopter view of how you got into technology, and specifically then where you found yourself with Artlogic and your career within that business.
Well, I have a design background, so I studied product design. And after leaving university, I just kind of, a common thing where you kind of are almost sick of doing that particular strain of what you were doing for 4 years at uni. And also kind of product design, automotive industry and all that kind of thing didn't seem to be where I wanted to head. So I ended up just falling into graphic design because it's something that I could do as a kind of side hustle. And then from there, I just found it kind of slightly unfulfilling after a while, and just decided to kind of move into tech. So I just did a load of night school classes, that kind of thing, just trying to learn coding, and lucked out with a job at Artlogic when they were very small and took a kind of punt on me. And it just went from strength to strength, really. I kind of started as a mainly designer, but then just, in dribs and drabs, started doing bits of development, took that on as well. And now kind of head up, most of our bespoke design and development with a colleague of mine, Tom Brickman, who's the Chief Creative Officer. And yeah, so it's kind of just flourished over time. And I think, that progression of my career has kind of flourished at the same time as the company. The trajectory of the growth of the company has always kind of sustained that, because I've never felt the need to kind of make a leap elsewhere, because it's always been kind of more to do, better roles, whatever it may be, that's just kind of grown alongside my own kind of arc. So I've been lucky, really, I guess.
Yeah, and we'll come to that, because staying within a business that's growing and evolving, that provides multiple career opportunities, doesn't it? And that's a massive hook, I think, when we're looking at different types of businesses. And so Hannah, how about you then? Because again, you've been with the business for a little while, but how did you get into technology?
Well, my kind of education was actually within the arts. So I went to art school originally, and then similarly to Dave, after graduating, was not sure where to place my interests, started making a few websites on the side because it's a nice thing to do. And that became a kind of greater and greater interest. So after a couple of years, I then did a kind of code intensive boot camp, just because when you're first trying to learn how to code and what you might be interested in, there's so many areas you might want to apply yourself, and it's actually quite hard to know where to start and what to look at, what language to learn, what you should be doing. So that was a really useful kind of 12 weeks to just kind of give me that kind of logic, the kind of basic underpinning logic of kind of programming. And then similarly to Dave as well, I would say Artlogic took a punt on me as someone that hadn't had loads of experience with development. And my first job with Artlogic was as a web developer. And then again, that was over 7 years ago. So I feel like I've had at least 10 jobs within that time, but all within Artlogic. So I used to work kind of on websites, did some imports where you're kind of crunching data from one system to another, and then within the database system for the longest amount of time. So many different hats and many different roles within a company that feels the same but has grown a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And again, we were having a joke, weren't we? Because when you both started, was it you started the business on a barge almost, wasn't it? Or it felt like that?
I think that's not a literal barge. We were in an office that was kind of on the first floor of a building in Clapham, and it was kind of a really long, narrow room. So we all sat along the edge of the room with our backs to each other. And it just felt like you were kind of on a narrow boat or something. It was kind of a weird feeling, and like, I don't know, there was quite funny times there because it's, you know, it's such a small team, and it was slightly sort of ragtag group of people that just had, you know, doing everything, as Hannah says. You know, you had to just do a bit of everything because it was kind of, that's the nature of a business with 5-6 people. And yeah, we were just kind of remembering how we used to walk up to the pub in Clapham, and every time we walked in on a Friday, the landlord, what was his name? Heather, I can't remember. I think his name was Willie. Anyway, he used to shout, "Hello, nerdlings," as we walked in through the door, because we were this kind of like group of like quite quiet sort of, you know, timid programmers. And now thinking about the kind of difference between that and the company as it is currently, which is, you know, 50-ish people and obviously New York and everything else, it feels like such a world away from where we are now.
Yeah, because your office now, I think I was saying to Hannah, you know, you're in a beautiful office in Oval now, aren't you? And I think you've either the landlord of the office, who loves his food, I understand, who's the canteen. There's a shared resources of the canteen, which is sort of led by sort of world-class chefs almost. It sounds like you know, you must have been missing that for the past year in lockdown.
It's one of my saddest lockdown things is the not going to the canteen. Our food was so delicious. Haven't been living our best lives since then, actually.
Slightly sad sandwiches made at home.
Yeah.
Doesn't really cut it.
Which is what we're all having to live, isn't it? So I think again, we were sort of talking, and we won't focus on this podcast, but the whole back to work and what that's going to look like in the future, and you know, needing that blend, so we're not just relying on our bland sandwiches at home, but we get to see our colleagues and friends again, and all the rest of it. But one thing that I've always been interested with you guys, and a lot of our listeners, we've focused our podcast on STEM graduates. Now, I learned recently by the CTO of Direct Line that actually STEM has progressed to STEAM, because actually what we look for now is not just science, technology, engineering, and maths. Art is actually a really important part of the future technology, and you guys live and breathe this, because not only are you in the art industry, but a lot of what you look for in people to join the team need to have a passion for design, which is basically an art background, and so actually you don't just need to be a chemical engineer or a mathematician or a scientist to get into technology. Art is actually a really, really crucial way in. And Hannah, it sounds like you're living proof of that by studying art, but then transferring into technology. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in technology and programming, I think that there's so much of thinking. You have to think creatively often. And so there's a natural crossover between art and that, and problem solving and all those kind of things that I think originally when I kind of explained to people what I was doing now and my background before, it would be, I think people would find it a bit strange, but for me, it's always seemed like there's a natural crossover there, and loads of transferable skills.
Yeah. And David, how do you think, you know, because again, both of you, technology was the sort of the secondary to what you were studying at university, and then you've self-taught yourself, which I think is brilliant. But how have you found that?
I think, you know, in development, website development, which is obviously my side of things, I think there's as Hannah said, there's so much creativity that has to happen kind of on the fly while you build and make things, that it's not just about kind of, programming by numbers. And something that I really value in developers is people that can kind of design as they go along. So, they can make lots of micro decisions about how things should look and feel as they go along. And that is such a kind of creative strain that you need to be able to do that. I don't know if it necessarily, feeds back to art school per se, but there's that kind of gray area there where you need to just have that creative spark while you're developing. You can't just sit there and crunch numbers or whatever. You have to just sort of think out of the box the whole time and come up with something that, performs beautifully and functions well. And I think, coming back to the kind of ethos of the company and thinking about who our clients are, beauty and elegance within the functionality of our products is kind of, paramount. It's at the heart of everything we do. And actually, from the very outset, when Peter created the company, and he did that because he was working in art galleries, and he just hated this idea of using a kind of Rolodex, and all of the databases he used were ugly and kind of, just kind of revolting. And he wanted to create something beautiful that, people could use day to day and enjoyed using. And that's kind of just shone through all the way to now, that it really is a consideration that we make in everything that we do. So yeah, absolutely, it's super important that people have that kind of creative strain.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, and it's not even just for Artlogic, even though your business is art, that's a transferable skill in pretty much, I personally believe, in all technology businesses. The user interface. So although for your business it's very specific, but nowadays, to have a competitive advantage in any technology business, you've got to be a platform that people want to engage with, that they enjoy interacting with. And so that whole UI UX, as well as the look and feel, and then obviously the functionality behind it, making your life very simple, which is the value add. It really is something I think we all should consider. And so moving on to thinking about, and we were talking about, a lot of the series before, we've always talked about emerging technologies and different things here. And what really excites me about you guys is thinking about how you combine an industry, a traditional industry like art, and as you said, with your founder working in art galleries, and it probably not being linked to technology, and how you can provide a service that people can trust with technology, which is the absolute future, as we all know. Should we talk a little bit about how that's converged and how Artlogic have done it specifically, when you've probably had to deal with clients who may not have trusted the technology or understood the value that it could bring? How have you found that as a journey, bringing these two things together?
I think it's been a slow journey, a fast journey at a certain point. I think it's generally now everyone is so used to so many things being cloud-based or online that kind of switch of mentality has really helped us, because I think, Peter, our kind of founder, was quite ahead of his time in terms of what he was building. And there's a company we've been dedicated to being online for a long time. So it's almost like everything suddenly caught up with that. And then that's just accelerated things. So I think we've kind of, I don't know if you agreed, Dave, but almost like the hard work of being like, hey, it's great that things are online. It's great that things are on the cloud. It's nothing to be afraid of, has been done now. And now we can just kind of further innovate on that.
Absolutely. I think, the art world traditionally has been a kind of slightly slow adopter of new technology. And I think that comes from a few different reasons. I guess part of it is this idea about kind of personal relationships and, making connections with collectors and galleries and dealers, and kind of, deals done between those people in a kind of face-to-face way. And so, things like putting the prices on your website, for a long time, that was just something you absolutely did not do. You just didn't do that. Don't tell anyone how much it costs. And, that kind of slow adopter, sort of conservative approach used to be something that we were just really banging our heads against the wall to try and kind of convert people's mentality there. And now, as Hannah says, increase even more so with the pandemic, people have just really raced to catch up. And suddenly, selling online viewing rooms, bolder designs. They're not just kind of trying to make a kind of very simple brochure for their website. They want a really functional website that's bringing them sales leads, that's actually working for them day to day. And adopting new things like augmented reality, these sorts of things that we're working on at the moment, kind of thing, better ways to visualize art. I think people are starting to realize that actually helps them make, tangible sales. It's not just about having a nice looking website that you can just point people to. It's actually working for you. And, for example, one of the galleries that we work with in Canada, they were very keen to let us know that once they changed their websites, they put all of the prices of the artworks onto the website, they noticed a massive upswing in sales, and also a massive increase in people not trying to kind of nickel and dime on the price, basically, to try and negotiate them down, because people are much more kind of used to just seeing the price of something online and, okay, that's how much it costs, and then making that transaction, rather than trying to sort of like get in touch and make a deal and see what they can kind of work out. So very interesting kind of change mentality that is happening out there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it sort of stems from both what Hannah talked about, how people have now built trust in cloud, which, that was challenge number one, wasn't it? When we're trying to build websites, CRM systems, when we're trying to really scale and support companies, it's been quite a journey getting people to really trust, embrace, and understand that we can now host things in the cloud, and it is secure, and it is it is robust, so you can scale much quicker. But I also think, David, what you said is changing perceptions. And the great example of putting prices onto websites in the art world, that was probably seen as the absolute taboo. You don't do that. If you can't ask, you can't afford it. If you have to ask, you can't afford it type mentality.
It's not for you.
Yeah, which is a changing mindset. And I think there's limiting beliefs that, because I remember when I first meeting with you guys, you're one of the businesses that actually through COVID, you've really shone, haven't you? I mean, that because it's forced the change in perception. So I can imagine a lot of your clients who have been on the fence for a long time, but almost forced into going for it. And as you said, David, they're seeing the rewards now. The upside is there. Is that a fair statement? Have you seen this sort of massive sort of realization over the past 2 years?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in terms of e-commerce, multiple hundreds of % increase in usage of that. And, during the lockdown, galleries had to close, and they had to look for ways to continue to sell art, to display works, to, promote their upcoming artists, the new artists. All that kind of stuff still had to happen. And the place that they had to do that was, online. And so we saw a huge upswing in people looking to kind of get in touch and use our products. And we also had to kind of react very, very, in a kind of really agile way. We had to come up with new products that kind of enable people to do that very quickly. So online viewing rooms is a good example of that, where we kind of put together this product where people can create these quite immersive sort of editorial bits of content for an exhibition or whatever it may be, or just an online show. And then they can kind of release that via social media or whatever it may be. And then people that come to the site have to kind of enter a data capture or whatever. They can choose how they want to kind of slice and dice that. And so it's increasing, sales leads and a buzz. And those are actually time-based. They're kind of time limited. So basically it goes live on a certain time. And then after that, it can potentially just go offline. So it creates a buzz, a kind of drop, feeling of a drop sort of thing. And so that's just an example of the sort of thing where we kind of quickly put that together in a pandemic or kind of improved that product. We had something in place already, but it's just a massive upswing and all those kinds of outlets for people that want to sell art and show art online.
Yeah. And Hannah, knowing that you've progressed your career, as you said, you joined from the art world, started as a web developer. Now you're the director of the database part of the business. So really that infrastructure sort of falls with you, doesn't it? The capacity, the how you make it super safe and secure. So thinking about your team and your role within the business, how important is security and cloud and actually having a product that your art clients can trust to be able to put their products online?
I mean, security is paramount. This is where, especially with the database side of things, this is where, clients' most sensitive data is kept. That they need to feel that that's 100% secure. And so luckily it's not all my responsibility. We have a CTO as well and a whole infrastructure team that are constantly kind of looking at all our procedures around that. And it's a really interesting part of how you do things online in a kind of safe and scalable way. But yeah, having that kind of, our clients having that trust in our products, in the kind of, especially in the business management side of things, is so important. But it's a real balance as well, because they also need to be able to access that information everywhere and be able to present stuff they want to present online in kind of quickly and easily as well. So via the websites, or we have kind of a presentation app as well. So it's actually, there's some information that is public facing and then a lot of information that's not public facing. So we need the kind of different procedures with both.
Yeah.
But it's a really kind of, that's the kind of the grounding of our relationship with our clients, I think, is that trust in the system.
Yeah, and I can imagine, especially in your industry, but it's similar in many industries, when you're taking clients on a journey, so they may not be technology advanced because their love is art rather than tech, that there probably has to be a lot of, it's a journey you're taking them through. And unfortunately, if reputation's years to build, seconds to lose. If you get it wrong once, it can be pretty damaging. So I can imagine. I'm glad you've got a team around you, because it is a team effort. That shouldn't sit on one person's shoulders. Well, can you believe it? Time is flying by. So we're the last part, as always. And again, as you know, many of our STEM listeners, one thing that they are always really interested to hear about with companies that are growing like Artlogic, is what career advice, what one or two bits can you each give them when they're applying for that? And it's not just graduates as well, it's those second, third jobbers. What is one or two bits of advice you can give our listeners when they're preparing for an interview and wanting to get a career into tech? David, if we start with you.
On the website side of things, I think what I'm often looking for is something that just kind of makes you stand out from the crowd, that kind of shows that you're particularly passionate about making websites. And and often that's kind of showing a little bit of additional initiative. For example, boot camps, as Hannah's a boot camp grad, and they are fantastic at kind of jump starting your career in tech. But what we find from boot camps is that quite often a lot of graduates will kind of have the same sort of work that they did on the course, and it'll look quite kind of samey. And so in that massive sea of people, you kind of look for someone that's just super passionate, done something on their own steam that excites them, and has kind of shown initiatives that they can really talk about that thing that they're interested in, and that may be some websites they made, and they can just talk about this technical challenge that they had to overcome and are really interested in it. So I think normally on my initial recruitment calls, I ask somebody to just talk about anything they've made and kind of talk me through roughly how they made it and what the challenges were, because I think that's such a revealing kind of thing to ask. Because if they just sort of say, well, out of the box, I use this and that's it, the end, it just doesn't really kind of sing. So yeah, initiative, something that shows your kind of personality and your kind of passion would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. And Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I was chatting to Dave and Joe the other day about one of my bootcamp projects, which we were learning WebSockets, which is technology. It's kind of like, I think of it in a really basic terms as like radio. So you kind of tune into a signal and you can fire messages back and forth. So I used that. I kind of just got really like enamored with this and had this idea to make basically like really basic paint. So you could both kind of collaborate on a drawing. That was one of my bootcamp things. You were drawing on either Gary Newman or Gary Oldman's face. That was the premise of this. That was how my weird stress shone through in that person project. So yeah,
I think that would stand out as not a standard coursework project. The Gary Newman, Gary Oldman paint game. I can see why you were hired.
Yeah. Kind of echo that with just not even just from a hiring perspective, but just when you're learning a kind of new technology, it's really apply it to something that you find interesting, and you'll kind of get more out of it as well as showing that off. The other thing that I kind of look for in an interview and think is useful to maybe even just start practicing doing is to be able to really kind of, in really simple terms, talk through how you made something. Because often, kind of imagine you're explaining it to your like most elderly relative or something in a way that's really understandable. Because often when you have to do that, you also kind of clarifies your own thoughts on something, as well as being a really useful tool in breaking down to someone that you actually understand this and you can speak about it in a way that shows that.
Yeah.
So that's because it's easy to list lots of different technologies, and I've used XYZ technology to make this, but like, how did you use them and what did you do to create that? So that's something I'd look for as well.
Yeah, thank you both, because I think both of those points are absolutely spot on. So, in summary for our listeners, having a passion for something and actually being able to show that you're passionate and that you've gone the extra mile, whether that's building your own websites or just to be able to speak authentically and passionately about something is super important, because as David said, there is 1,000 people who may have all studied the same course. So to be able to stand out, being passionate and authentic. And Hannah, from what you said, I totally agree. Being able to explain clearly and coherently what you've done, rather than feel like you have to use a number of buzzwords that may or may not actually make sense. It's much better to try and break it down into as simplistic words as possible. Therefore, people know what you're talking about. I think we can all see through people pretty quickly when they're reading off. And this is probably a mistake that many grads may make due to nerves or lack of confidence, that they feel they may have to try and use overcomplicated explanations, when actually sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. So yeah, both of those points really, really valid, and thank you both. And yeah, that's another podcast. That's the end of our show. So as I do my wrap up, Hannah, David, thank you both. I hope you enjoyed that and it wasn't too painful.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, great having you both as guests. To our listeners, this is the first episode of our 4th series, where we'll be looking at both company-specific journeys as well as the stories of our guests. And as always, the podcasts are on our landing page, arrowspodcasts.com, and they're also on the career portals of now our 22 partner universities across the UK and Netherlands. And always, we will be posting our weekly podcast on LinkedIn, so you know where to go and when the episodes will be shown. So for everyone listening, thank you. It's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series, and I hope that you all tune in next week. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.